It was July in Las Vegas. Heat pressed against the city like a heavy hand. Inside a quiet home on the northwest side, Nevada's state controller, a woman who had survived political scandal, public scrutiny, and personal reinvention, lay motionless in her bedroom. Hours later, the headlines would explode. But for now, there was only silence. Kathy Marie Augustine was never someone who stayed in the shadows. Born in 1956 in Los Angeles to a working-class family, she carried a blend of sharp intelligence and unapologetic ambition that would define the course of her life. Friends from her early years remembered her as articulate, quick to speak her mind, and always seeming to know where she wanted to go, even when the path was far from straightforward. After earning a degree in journalism from Carolina State University, she started working as a flight attendant. It was an unexpected start for a woman who would one day hold state-level office, but it reflected a thread that ran through Kathy's story: adaptability. She navigated different worlds with ease, switching registers from casual conversation to forceful debate, from warm charm to strategic calculation. Her marriage to her first husband, airline pilot Bill Jimenez, brought her to Nevada, and in Nevada, she found politics. The state's political scene in the late 1980s and early 90s offered opportunities to those with persistence and a knack for visibility. Kathy had both. She served in the Nevada Assembly beginning in 1992, quickly building a reputation for thorough policy knowledge and a willingness to take positions others found risky. By 1994, she'd moved to the state Senate, and just 4 years later, she was elected Nevada's state controller. In that role, she became known for two things: meticulous control of fiscal data and a refusal to wilt under pressure. Allies saw her as a dedicated public servant who demanded accountability. Critics, and there were plenty, saw her as combative, even ruthless when challenged. Her image as a political fighter solidified in 2004, when she faced impeachment over ethics violations linked to her use of state resources during her re-election campaign. The Nevada Assembly voted to impeach, making her the first state official in Nevada history to face such proceedings. The outcome was complicated. She was censored, fined, and her political wings clipped, but she stayed in office. It was a public blow, yet also an improbable survival. For those who knew her personally, it was a representation of her resilience. Kathy's capacity to absorb scandal and keep moving forward set her apart in a political landscape where many careers end at the first sign of serious trouble. By mid-2003, Kathy's public career was still intact after the bruising ethics scandal of the previous year, but her private life was under strain. She had been married to Delta Airlines pilot and political consultant Chaz Augustine for 17 years, a union that, according to friends and later testimony, had been faltering. Those close to the couple said divorce had been discussed, though nothing formal had been filed. In the summer of that year, Charles suffered a debilitating stroke. He was admitted to a Las Vegas hospital, where his prognosis initially appeared guarded but not hopeless. Kathy spent long hours at his bedside, navigating the dual roles of political figure and anxious spouse. It was during this hospital stay, though, that she met William Charles Chaz Higgs, a critical care nurse and former US Navy medic assigned to Charles's care. Accounts from friends and investigators later described the connection between Kathy and Higgs as rapid and intense, a bond that seemed to form in the emotionally charged environment of the ICU. Higgs was attentive, personable, and medically knowledgeable, qualities that may have offered Kathy a sense of steadiness amid the uncertainty of her husband's condition. In the weeks following the stroke, Charles's health showed signs of improvement. Plans were reportedly being made to discharge him for continued intensive care at home. But before that could happen, On August 19th, 2003, Charles died in the hospital from complications related to his stroke. His death certificate listed natural causes, and at the time, there was no public suggestion of foul play. After Kathy's murder in 2006, investigators did take a hard look back at the death of her second husband. Authorities in Las Vegas acknowledged their suspicions, the fact that Charles had been on the mend before dying, and Kathy and Higgs's rapid relationship raised red flags. Reports at the time indicate police did review the circumstances, but without preserved toxicology samples or an autopsy from 2003, there was no physical evidence to re-examine. In the end, there was never enough proof to bring charges or formally reclassify Charles Augustine's death. What shocked many after Charles's death in Kathy's circle was what happened next. Just 3 weeks after Charles's death, she married Chaz Higgs in Hawaii. The speed of the remarriage, combined with the fact that Higgs had been part of Charles' medical team, fueled gossip in political and personal circles. Some friends expressed discomfort, while others defended Kathy's right to move forward after years of marital strain. Her marriage to Chaz, like Kathy herself, drew commentary. There were whispers about how quickly it had happened, about tensions between the two, and the strain of a life so often under the microscope. Friends and colleagues later told investigators that the relationship was marked by frequent arguments and long stretches of cold distance. Kathy's demanding political schedule often kept her away from home, while Chaz seemed increasingly resentful of the scrutiny that came with being married to a controversial public figure. By 2006, the cracks were visible to those close to them. Witnesses recounted that Chaz sometimes spoke unfavorably about Kathy to others, and that he had confided in acquaintances about marital problems. According to court records and media coverage, investigators learned that Chaz had been communicating with other women during the marriage, conversations that, while not always overly romantic, suggested he was seeking emotional or personal connections outside the relationship. By July 2006, Kathy Augustine's life was a study in contrast. In public, she remained Nevada's state controller, polished, composed, and campaigning for a seat as state treasurer. In private, her marriage to Chaz Higgs was fraying. Arguments simmered, the silences were long, and Higgs was confiding in others about his dissatisfaction. What Kathy did not know, and what investigators would only piece together later, was that her husband had been speaking casually, almost academically, about a way to end a person's life without leaving a trace. A fellow nurse would testify that Higgs had described the best way to kill someone, a hospital-grade paralytic called succinylcholine. A witness came forward telling investigators Higgs said, quote, "If you want to kill somebody, you hit them with a bit of sucks." In the controlled environment of an operating room, it was a tool. In the wrong hands, it was a weapon of precision. Higgs explained that the drug worked within seconds, paralyzing every voluntary muscle, including the diaphragm, while leaving the victim conscious and aware. Deprived of breath, the heart would eventually stop, and unless someone knew exactly what to test for, the substance would vanish quickly from the body, the death resembling a sudden heart attack. Higgs's job gave him both the knowledge and the access. Succinylcholine was kept in hospitals for rapid intubation procedures. Outside hospital walls, without anesthesia and a ventilator, it could deliver a quiet, efficient death. On the morning of July 8, 2006, inside Kathy's home, the details of what happened remained known only to 2 people, and one of them would not survive the day. According to prosecutors, Higgs seized a private moment, drew up a dose of succinylcholine, and injected it into Kathy. If they were right, the effect would have been swift and terrifying. Within 30 to 60 seconds, Kathy's muscles would have begun to twitch as the drug bound to receptors, flooding her system. Moments later, those twitches would give way to stillness. Her chest would feel impossibly heavy, her body unresponsive, her mind still racing. She would be acutely aware that she could not draw a breath. Without immediate medical intervention, unconsciousness would come. it took her about 20 minutes to die. At some point after the injection, Higgs dialed 911. His voice, calm enough to be recorded without panic, relayed that his wife had collapsed and might be having a heart attack. Paramedics arrived to find Kathy unresponsive, without clear signs of external trauma. Higgs's account, that she had been stressed and possibly overworked, fit the surface facts. There was nothing at the scene to suggest foul play. Ambulances in Reno moved fast, and within minutes of the call, emergency responders were in her home, working against the clock. They intubated, ventilated, pushed emergency drugs, and rushed her to a hospital. For the medics, it was an ordinary cardiac arrest scenario. Stabilize, transport, and hope the heart and brain can be coaxed back. No one suspected that the real cause was already coursing out of her system, leaving almost no trace. Days after being taken to hospital, Kathy Augustine was taken off life support, and her death remained officially unexplained. The coroner's early notes mentioned cardiac arrest. There were no bruises, no signs of a struggle. To the casual eye, even to seasoned medics, it looked like the kind of sudden medical event that can strike under stress. And Kathy had been under stress. The political world mourned and moved on, but inside the Reno Police Department, a few detectives felt uneasy. Kathy was healthy for her age, with no major medical conditions to suggest a catastrophic collapse. One detail kept circling in their minds. She'd been married to Chaz Higgs, a man who was both intimately close to her and professionally skilled in critical care medicine. That combination, access and expertise, can be benign, but it also can be dangerous. The first fissure in the facade came from a conversation hundreds of miles away. A nurse in Virginia, who had once worked alongside Higgs, heard the news of Kathy's death and reached out to authorities. She remembered an offhand remark he had made. The perfect way to kill someone was with a drug called succinylcholine, a hospital paralytic, because it would wear off fast and could be missed by routine testing. It had struck her as morbid at the time, but in light of Kathy's sudden death, it no longer sounded like a joke. Detectives now had something they could hold on to, a thread to pull. They called the medical examiner, urging a deeper toxicologist analysis. But succinylcholine is a slippery prey. Within minutes of entering the body, it's metabolized into compounds the body naturally produces. Unless you're looking for it, and looking soon, it can disappear without a trace. Finding a laboratory to test for succinylcholine was also challenging. There were only 2 labs in the country. The samples were eventually sent to the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia. The toxicology work would take weeks, so detectives didn't waste time. While the lab searched for answers in Kathy's blood, they began knocking on doors. Speaking with paramedics who had responded that day, the hospital staff who'd fought to revive her, and family members who might shed light on her final hours. They tried to question Chaz Higgs, but he shut them out, offering no cooperation. As investigators quietly closed in, Higgs played the part of the grieving widower, yet the mask slipped on the eve of Kathy's funeral. That night, he attempted to take his own life. To police, the gesture could be read in 2 ways. One possibility, a surge of remorse, the weight of his wife's death pressing down on him. The other, and to them the far more likely, was darker. An act of self-preservation, born of selflessness and a refusal to face the reckoning that was coming. Despite a suicide note proclaiming his love for Kathy and blaming state officials for her death, the police were not swayed by Higgs's superficial grief. Instead, they were making headway on their investigation. Several friends recalled Chaz speaking bitterly about his marriage, venting that he wanted out and at times wishing Kathy dead. Investigators also uncovered that he'd been chatting online with other women during their relationship, forming what prosecutors would later call emotional affairs and further undermining any pretense of a happy home. It was a portrait of a man pulling away, yet still positioned close enough to control how and when Kathy's life would end. Even after her death, Chaz was talking to multiple women online, stating he was single now. Then came the matter of his behavior on the day she collapsed. When police reconstructed the timeline, one detail leapt out. Despite being a trained ICU nurse, Higgs did not perform CPR before paramedics arrived. That omission, for law enforcement, was as telling as anything he said. He did call 911, steering the story towards stress and a possible heart attack, but made no mention of toxins or other possibilities. To detectives' eyes, that wasn't shock, it was stage management. Weeks passed as the toxicology lab worked meticulously on the samples. When the results landed, they confirmed what the tipster had feared. Traces of succinylcholine were present in Kathy's blood, a drug she had no medical reason to receive, a drug her husband knew inside out. The investigation's momentum surged. Motive, means, and opportunity were now bound together by science. They could place Higgs alone with Kathy in the critical window before her collapse. They had witnesses recalling his detailed talk about the almost undetectable way to kill. They had a marriage in disrepair and a husband cultivating other romantic connections. And they had the chemical evidence tying it all to her death. In late September 2006, authorities tracked him to Virginia Beach and arrested him for first-degree murder. When the trial of Chaz Higgs opened in June 2007, prosecutors wasted no time weaving a seamless and damning narrative, portraying him as a critical care nurse who turned his life-saving skills into a weapon against his wife, Nevada State Controller Kathy Augustine. They described how Kathy, in the days before her sudden collapse, had been healthy and focused on her political work, with no hint of the catastrophe to come. Jurors heard how Higgs had been alone with her in the moments before she was found unconscious, how he failed to attempt CPR despite his training, and how friends and colleagues remember him coldly discussing, months earlier, the perfect murder method, injecting the fast-acting paralytic succinylcholine, which leaves almost no trace. That macabre boast took on a chilling weight when the FBI's toxicology results confirmed the presence of the drug in Kathy's system, a drug she had no medical reason to receive, and one whose effects would silently shut down her ability to breathe while leaving her mind aware. The state's case gained further potency when forensic testimony revealed a small puncture mark on Kathy's left buttock, a likely injection site hidden from casual view, but consistent with how a medical professional might discreetly administer such a drug. The prosecution presented this as the physical link between Higgs's earlier words and his wife's death, arguing that it was both deliberate and calculated. Into this tapestry of evidence came the testimony of nurse Kim Ramsey, who recounted Higgs's casual pantomime of a syringe injection as he described succinylcholine's deadly potential, and the uncomfortable revelations of his online flirtations with other women during the marriage, suggesting a motive rooted in resentment and a desire for escape. Higgs took the stand in his own defense, denying he had harmed Kathy and claiming an undiagnosed heart issue could be to blame. But under cross-examination, his composure frayed, especially when prosecutors pressed on a suicide attempt days after her death. And again, dramatically, mid-trial, when he slashed his wrist in what many jurors later described as a self-serving act. The defense attacked the FBI's lab methods, but the state's experts were unequivocal. The drug was real, it was in her body, and it should not have been. After less than a day of deliberations, the jury returned a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. And Kathy's daughter Dallas summed up the moment with quiet finality, saying she could at last move on while Higgs could spend the rest of his life in prison. In the years after the verdict, the ripple from Kathy Augustine's murder continued to move through both the family and Nevada's political memory. Chaz Higgs was sent to serve life in prison without the possibility of parole. His appeals, including a 2010 bid claiming his defense hadn't had enough time to challenge the FBI's toxicology methods, ultimately rejected. For Kathy's daughter Dallas, the conviction had brought a measure of closure, but the loss of her mother under such calculated circumstances left a wound that no sentence could fully heal. Kathy Augustine's story deserves to be remembered as far more than a manner of her death. She was a woman who carried herself with drive and conviction, who carved out a space for herself in Nevada's political history through determination, intellect, and a refusal to be underestimated. Behind the public titles and headlines was a daughter, a mother, a friend, someone who could light up a room with energy, who weathered personal storms with a resilience that few saw in full. The tragedy is not just that her life was taken, but it was taken by someone who she had let into her trust, her home, her heart. That small puncture mark on her skin became the cruel, silent imprint of that betrayal, a detail so slight it could have been missed, yet it spoke louder than any witness, telling the world that her final moments were stolen, not spent in peace. In remembering Kathy, it's important to see past the crime scene and into the vibrant life that came before it, the ambitions she chased, the people she loved, the tenacity that carried her through both victories and setbacks. Her death may have made the headlines, but it's her life, the force of it, the warmth of it, that should echo longest in memory. Thank you for listening.